Rolling?
Rolling.
Ready? 1, 2, 3. Welcome to Muay Thai Bones Library Coffee Edition. Name pending.
Name pending. We have coffee.
We do have coffee. If you're joining us for the first time, Library Coffee is organized around Muay Thai Library sessions that you filmed with legends and great crews around Thailand, archiving the techniques of the country and often the disappearing techniques and knowledge that flourished mostly in the golden age in the 1990s, early 80s.
But also great trainers, current fighters, very recently retired fighters. Like
Totally.
All the technique of the Muay of Thailand.
And by becoming, if you're watching on YouTube, by becoming a patron, you can get access to this library. We're almost at 100 hours archived, which is incredible. And in the Library Coffee, we sit and have coffee and discuss. We often discuss a session we just filmed, but that's proving logistically difficult. So Sylvie just rewatched the session. She's about to voice it over with commentary. So this is our fresh take on the session, having just watched it. We filmed it maybe a month or two ago.
A month ago, I think.
A month ago. This is Kru Diesel at FA Group.
He is awesome.
He's incredible. For a very long time. Oh, so if you're not going to see the session, the nature of the Library Coffee is to talk about big ideas that are found in the session so that you can just enjoy Muay Thai conversation, like deep level concept conversation. And then if you want, you can look at the session and see the origin of those thoughts.
It's like a sexy Cliff's Notes, or like if you're gonna buy a coffee, it's got the like tasting notes.
The tasting notes. It's like the tasting notes. Yeah. Okay, so maybe a little bit of background. FA Group is known as a Muay Khao knee fighting, clinch-oriented gym for a long time. Pat Boon Chu, one of the greatest knee fighters, especially of the contemporary modern era, I guess.
I think contemporary most decorated fighter.
Yeah. Although now I think retired if he's not retired, he's on the edge of retired. He's not fighting.
He's functionally Thailand retired.
Yeah. But
as well as Yotin's amazing as well.
But many great knee fighters have come out of there. I believe Kru Diesel, who we filmed with, was the crew of even Yodwicha, who is one of the great knee fighters also of the time. Forgive me if I got that wrong. But we wanted to film with him for a very long time for the library. We knew he had a lot of, just a ton of technique and wisdom that we wanted to archive, but it just wasn't working out. And we were really excited when we finally, our friend Cy Walker,
who was training there and fighting out of there,
he hooked us up.
Yeah.
Right. So
you'll see him in the video if you see the video.
Yeah, totally. So do you want to kick us off on things to take from this session, this hour-long Muay Khao and clinch session with Kru Diesel, drawing out larger ideas worth talking about?
I think that it's worth noting that, like, in general, there are not always gyms that teach or focus on one style. Gyms often can accommodate any style to a pretty good degree. And then there are gyms that have like hard tendencies, like you have really good punchers out of a certain gym, or how FA Group is a really good knee gym because of Kru Diesel. That makes sense. But like going into this, knowing what Kru Diesel is and knowing that it was going to be a knee session and I'm a knee fighter, like it's like your favorite thing's ice cream and you're going to go to an ice cream shop. It's pretty exciting. But even I, knowing all of this going into it, was really not necessarily surprised, but satisfied by the breadth and depth of how much technique there is to teach there. There's no like I picked this up in a month.
What does that mean?
You can't go there for a month and you're like, well, I've exhausted everything they know about knee fighting. It's endless.
I would say that when you're like, gyms are not of a particular style, that's more contemporary Thai gyms. In the day, I think like in the golden age, gyms definitely fed on a particular style more often. like Jockey Gym produced endless femur
Hop-along
geniuses,
gym.
Hop-along Gym's huge knee fighter. That back in the day, gyms had more defined styles, but
Yeah.
in
Studio Thomas femur mainly, yeah.
contemporary times, especially gyms that take in Westerners, you can generally learn a broad spectrum of Muay Thai in a gym. You were satisfied with how clinch and knee oriented that your experience was there.
Yeah.
And we have to say, like, this is a private session, it's not just regular training. So I'm not sure how the regular training goes. We were between sessions.
Yeah. But in a private session, it exposes what a trainer knows.
Totally.
And it's Kru Diesels knows a lot.
Well, I also want to say this, that, well, did you have a larger point to go to first before I had this other thought?
No, go for it.
That this is not about this particular session, but it's about Sylvie. One of the amazing things about doing the Muay Thai Library and filming all over the country is that there is literally no person alive, including Thai people, like great Thai fighters, who's been exposed to the breadth of vocabulary of technique that Sylvie has in documenting all these people. The reason for this is that if you were raised at a jockey gym and were a Yod Muay, like Sanchai or whomever, Samrak, you were exposed to a branch of the Muay Thai tree.
Yeah.
So you learned from all the crews, all the pad men, all the sparring partners that came through that gym, but it's a branch, right? It went this way in the femur style. If you were raised in the Hopalong Gym in 1997, you were raised in a different branch of the tree. You were not exposed to what was happening in Jockey Gym.
Right.
And the happenstance of your fight path and how we've decided to like document everything has exposed you to so much high level vocabulary. Let's just say you never fought a fight and you were just going to be like a technique documentarian. The fight vocabulary, the technique vocabulary that you've been exposed to isn't just like, look at all the stuff I know. It means that when you encounter a fucking genius of a certain technique, like a Kru Diesel is, you're able to recognize all kinds of things that he's showing you. It's 1 second, somebody's truck's passing. Like when he shows you a technique, that's his version of the technique. You have in your mind 4 other versions that have been taught by also other Muay Khao geniuses.
Right.
That is like, it's like knowing dialects in a language.
Right.
And so you're able to get right on top of, like, I've already seen that pathway, but this is your particular take on it. So you're able to hone in on exactly the difference that he's saying that somebody else, that Namsak Noi did not say, or that Kru Ten didn't say.
Right.
And he recognizes your awareness and is able to unfold the technique more.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah. So it's the speed at which I'm picking something up and learning something and allowing the elaboration on that is pretty unique.
Totally. Otherwise, if a normal, very good Western fighter came and was not familiar with this class of moves, right? He would have to not only teach the move, but he would have to teach all the basics that surround the move also.
Yeah.
And that's valuable too, and that is in the library earlier in your development. But now you get to see the move and the elaborations around it, which is really the beauty and the art of the Muay, which it's not just when this happens, do that. It's all the context. This is, I guess this is really about what you're really doing about in these videos, which is super cool because they're going to be historic, is you're able to document the move and the context, like the way, it's like learning how a word is used in a language, and then you see all the ways it's used. And when watching this video, it just was amazing, the beautiful techniques that were being shown, but also the fabric of Muay that surrounds each of them.
That was something that you pointed out, and it's a word that we use to describe when you're actually working with someone in Muay Thai or fighting in Muay Thai is it's like a conversation. It's not this like, I'm going to do what I do in shadow boxing, but with someone in front of me, or like this set combination. Like, you don't learn chunked phrases and have a conversation. You have to have this like interaction flow of conversation. And what was really cool about the way that Kru Diesel handled this private, starting me out with 30 minutes of clinch, just go clinch
We've
with one of his
filmed almost
fighters.
100 hours now. No one's ever done anything close to that.
No, but in this session, you get to see that conversation thing, and because we both are talking about Muay Khao and we're both doing...
Well, when you talk about clinch, you were clinching with one of their stadium fighters.
I was literally just clinching with one of their stadium fighters, but then when I was working with Diesel, we would move into positions that are like clinch positions, and you see him fall into the hand trap that you loved so much. But you can see all the ways that he gets to it from other
Okay, but
angles.
for people who aren't going to watch the session, just so you know, there's about 20, 30 minutes that starts the session that is just you with one of their stadium fighters. And you basically fighting for position, and each of you doing counter versus counter versus counter, which
Right.
is so cool. You have to have a pretty high level of Muay Thai to be able to flow in a conversation
Right.
between two things. And that was
Right.
one of the more interesting things about the way this was taught, starting with just straight clinch, because in the West we kind of like learn a move, and you come to Thailand and you learn the like trip or the pole or whatever it is, like 3 things that you didn't know, and then you come home and nobody in the gym knows them, and you can do magic tricks, right? It's like learning a magic trick. The step beyond the magic trick level of knowledge is all the connective tissue that surrounds those tricks,
Right.
and learning how to set up the trick or the move. And the deeper and deeper you can set it up, like the further into time that you can set it up, the more powerful and inescapable it is.
Yeah, and it's also interesting to me because he's a real fighter, I'm a real fighter. We both have quite a bit of technique vocabulary. He's bigger than me and I'm pretty strong, so it's a strength versus strength thing, but he's bigger, stronger, more technique than me. The way that we were allowed to kind of develop together, like, it's not the same clinch for 30 minutes.
No.
Like, you bring out vocabulary and moves later as you start getting more tired, or as someone got something on you and you're like, now I need to up my vocabulary a little bit to like
That
get back
was
up
one
on
of the
that.
subtle things that was happening in that first 20, 30 minutes. Is the other thing that plays out is that clinch training in Thailand is not just techniques and not just fatigue.
It's not stop, let me show you how to do that.
It is dominance training.
It is dominance training.
And here you saw a really cool video of somebody who's a stadium fighter with, I don't know, what does he have, like 5 kilos on you or something?
Oh, more.
Okay,
Yeah.
strong. He could wreck you,
Yeah.
right? He's guiding you through a dominance, phone call for Sylvie. A dominance theater play, kind of, where the dominance is still real.
Yeah.
Like, he's not gonna fucking wreck you.
Right.
But as things develop, when you watch this, if you're a patron and you're gonna watch this, watch the subtle escalations from him.
Yeah.
Like when you would honestly get something
Yeah.
on him. Now he had to escalate, move to another series of moves or another in tempo, like increase the tempo or the theater of control. And that you would have to scramble up to meet him. Like you were saying to me an interesting thing, like your point calling, your oi, 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 which is something that you've learned in Thailand over a long period of time. Like, you look at me like you don't even know what I'm talking
Because you brought that up.
about.
I didn't bring that up.
No, but you were saying, you did bring up, when we were just talking about it, just so you understand our little debate, you were like, I'm calling all my points for dominance. He's not saying anything.
No, that's not what I said, but
Oh,
I
what
do
did you
understand
say?
what you're saying. I was verbally humiliating him after throwing him on the ground. I would make a joke,
That's what I'm saying.
and that's not calling a point. That's like,
Okay.
it's not time to lie down
It's
kind of thing.
hair splitting a little bit.
Whereas
Sylvie.
he would do something physically to, like, I don't have to say anything. I've now stepped it up and dominated
All
you
right,
more.
I'll return. We seem to be bickering on this. I'll return to what I was saying. It's like you lack the physical characteristics, attributes to physically own him,
Yeah.
except for certain moments. Like if you surprise him, you can throw him, right? You had to have recourse to calls, verbal calls, to play the dominance game. So like if you threw him, you would then make a joke about him lying on the ground, right, in Thai,
Right.
as part of the dominance game,
Yeah.
to basically level the scales.
Yeah, because when
Like-
you're bigger and stronger, you can physically show you're bigger and stronger. So when you're smaller and less strong, when you get someone down, I literally point out that I'm smaller. Like,
Yeah. But I'm not being critical
No,
here.
I'm not disagreeing with you, I'm agreeing with
I'm
you.
saying this is a really subtle element in that first 20, 30 minutes. Is like, yes, there's very cool techniques being shown. Kru Diesel is jumping in and being like correcting you or guiding you towards his style or his things he finds effective. But also there is another lesson in there in those first 20, 30 minutes, which is just watching this. This is a highly skilled stadium fighter who probably clinches with Westerners all the time in the gym. And he has a pretty cool level of threshold of not wrecking someone that he can physically wreck. And playing that kind of like dominance game.
Right.
And to play it, you had to add in the humor and stuff so that things could be kind of even.
Yeah, and
right?
it's very real for how you clinch in Thailand.
That's exactly. That's I'm sorry. That's kind of what I meant. Is that what you get to see is the clinch of Thailand demonstrated in a very, very real way, and that's something that's maybe missing in a lot of gyms outside of Thailand. That the point of Muay Khao clinch fighting is a kind of social dominance. It's not just landing a big knee point. It's not just tripping somebody and showing physical strength over somebody. There is a kind of like one-upsmanship that's going on in Muay Khao fighting that's much more obvious in femur fighting. In femur, it's like you're theatrically, like an extreme example is Sanchai. Like you can see him dominating his opponent with just like, pop, pop, pop. Oh, I just hit you.
Like, it's so
You
easy.
look at me like I'm crazy, actually. I feel like you're like
no,
pulling.
I'm interested that you think that this show of dominance is more prominent in femur style fighting.
It's not more prominent, it's more visually evident.
Okay, that's okay.
It's
That still surprises me because in Muay Khao, when you get someone into a position where they can't answer, to me that's very visual, but maybe it's just my aesthetic. It's how I look at
it
fights.
just in Muay Khao it looks like you were physically overpowered. Like, oh, that's strength.
Right.
When Lordzilla just like walks away from somebody who spins themselves in the ground, the dominance.
He's talking about an actual video clip.
Like when you do that to someone, there's no doubt that humiliation or dominance is so visual. Like it is almost like a comedy.
Yeah, nobody
movement.
missed that.
Nobody missed that. That's kind of what I meant. And in clinch fighting, much of the dominance is more like a secret between you and your partner. Like when you grab somebody's head and you jerk them, right? And you catch them off balance. They know
Yeah.
they had to suddenly stiffen up,
But
right?
does the audience know?
The audience doesn't see that little moment of like humiliation, like, oh, you just caught me.
Right.
And I feel like that's kind of what I mean about the visual elements of things, is like much of the dominance in clinch fighting is kind of between the two participants.
Yeah.
It's less theatrical. You know, you have that thing like
It's an A-B conversation.
A-B conversation, right? And you have that thing like in cinema, in movies, every gesture has to be very small because the camera is very small. In theater, everything is
big.
just very big. And I
Yeah.
think that in femur fighting, it's theatrical.
Yeah.
It's very big movements.
Yeah.
It can be.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is something very special in this session, that you get privy to the escalations of dominance of real true Thai style Muay Khao clinch, which is hard to capture on camera. You get it also in the Satamu neck video.
Yeah.
That dominance element.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll link that
Yeah.
in the description.
And what Kru Diesel is able to focus on, well, not at all times. Like he works on a great many things, and there's a lot of improvisation, like let's just move through this and see what comes up and we'll work on it kind of thing, is that when he decides to focus on a technique, it's how to make something look effortless. It's how to kind of give it this...
a flair?
A flair from a distance.
I didn't catch that. What are you thinking about? Bring it out for me.
There would be like a turn that was mainly about timing, but it was in order to not use power. And this is like a functional, so that you're not tiring yourself out and like using your power too much to be exhausted, because clinch fighting is very exhausting. But it was also this like, you make it look in a femur type way. You make it look for the back row how...
Like a magic trick.
Yeah, how easy that was for you.
That's a very interesting aspect of this, generally femur fighting is considered the like princely, artful version, and then in the stereotype, Muay Thai fighters are dumb farmers
like
from Isan, brutish, thuggy people who just use strength, right? And one of the like secrets, the dirty secrets of Muay Thai is there's just an incredible amount of technique and timing being used, but as I said, it's very closed. It's not showy. What is kind of cool is that, like you just brought up, that technique has a functional element to it, which is, yes, clinch is a strength game, but you don't want to use strength all the time. You don't even want to use it most of the time, because you want it for decisive moments. So part of Muay Thai is surfing this line between strength and technique, which is taking the proper angles, getting the right angle of leverage, so that a pull is easy rather than a pull is something you had to muscle through. Right? And I think that's where Muay Thai is really interesting, is that when you start getting to the high levels, you're just using technique almost all the time until that like 5% or 1% where you just have to bust a move. Just like a boxer would be like 45%, 45%, 80% hook just knocked you out. Right?
Well, that was a beautiful
thing. It's like an
thing
accuracy.
In the 30 minutes of clinch at the beginning, with this guy being so much bigger than me, he doesn't use his being bigger than me all that often. Like, he actually plays down to my size a lot. And then when it's like, I don't want to be bested by you, he'd like pop it for a second. Just for a second.
Just for a second, where he puts his extra whatever, 10, 15, 20 pounds, whatever, just in that move to like tip the leverage point. But that's also a beautiful technical thing, because you can feel where the tipping point is, and now you're like, and now I just lean into it and it's done. So
gentle reminder. Gentle reminder, I'm bigger.
Totally. And one of the cool things about you going through that is not a lot of people can go through that, which is that you've been clinching for now we're coming upon 6 years at Patron Rung with Thai boys. And so there's a language of play and dominance that's natural to Thai style clinch practice, which is like 30 minutes to an hour of just like endless clinching. Where you're always playing these little dominance games, these little tipping point games, these little technique games. You have to know that language. You can't just fucking tense up on somebody.
You'd die.
You would die, right? And so it's kind of cool that you're able to draw out more of that. Like, if he had been clinching with a less experienced but still skilled, larger Western fighter, you would have seen a completely different unfolding of what dominance and technique is.
Yeah, that's true.
Everything would have been much more tense, right? But here you was able to like ping pong paddle back and forth, ping pong, and then go for the win. And then you'd get some wins in sometimes too, which was kind of amazing. I was kind of surprised.
You won't miss them. I make a lot of noise.
So that was the first part of the session. What about the second part of the session with Kru Diesel? Like, what did you take from, aside, you were saying there were some impromptu moments, but the style that he was teaching you, we saw things that other legends had taught you versions of, but it was his version. It's very cool that everybody has their own version. Like, so it was very cool to me.
He didn't really stop and emphasize or articulate how to get to the clinch and the knee. But instead, he threw his body movements, his distance, and what he was holding for. He didn't call for things, but what he was holding for was how to stay in that sweet spot all the time.
Of distance?
Of my knee distance, basically. Like, I could always go for the knee with him. It was not a, like, make sure you punch before you get there kind of thing, which is often something that I'm being chastised for or instructed to. It felt incredibly natural for me, like we had
An understanding?
when you just get along with someone who you've never met before and you're like, oh, we're totally simpatico. Like, it felt like that on pads. And we definitely would surprise each other. Like, he would drop me with an incredible move periodically, or when he would try to get me off and I didn't, and he's like, that doesn't work. And so he'd go to the next thing. That's very real for fighting, is like, you thought that would work and it didn't. You can't have an, oh shit, that doesn't work. You have to just
That was
go to
one
the
of the
next thing.
interesting things about him, about those moments when he would pull a roll or an escape move that would probably escape from almost all Farang that he works with, especially someone small like you, that you've learned this stickiness, this glue. Yodkumpan taught it to you. Pinu's got aspects of it. Maybe talk a little bit about what this glue is that you'll see in the video if you're really looking for it, where there'd be a series of techniques or something on the pads, and then he would slip out and expect a break, because that's what happens usually, and you'd be just like glued. This glue is very...
I don't know how to describe it.
Well, get into it, man.
It's basically, you allow flexibility in your grip. Like, if you have one lock and it's too tight, it's very easy to pop off. Like, it's... I picture like the T1000 when he's like hooked into the car and the car's swerving, and he has flexibility, so he swerves with the car and you can't shake him. If it was too hard of a grip, you swerve the car and the person rolls off. And so when you hook, you have to have this flexibility in your movement where you can follow and pull back.
But still stiff at the end, at the contact point.
It's like hitching a trailer, but with like a little bit of a flexible cord to it.
And in real use of this, it's super cool, because when your opponent feels like they're about to get out, that's when it's like they're coming up for air.
And you take that breath, but you're still half underwater.
Yeah, you're like, you got a little sip. You did not get the gulp that you thought you would.
Yeah.
In this way, you can drown an opponent without landing a knee.
Yeah.
Like, if you get them bobbing up for air for a gulp, and they only get a sip, and you force their head back down, figuratively, and they do this 3 or 4 times, they will start to panic emotionally.
Yeah.
And that's something that Yodkumpan does,
Yes.
the elbow hunter, is he panics you by this continual trailer hitch thing.
Yeah.
And it wasn't something Kru Diesel was teaching you, it was actually something that was happening in pad work. I mean, the guy is fucking a genius. He didn't have a problem with it.
No.
I think he was
just surprised by it,
surprised that you're staying glued to the situation, which is a subtle skill that you might not ever notice in a fight
And
unless
so
you're
his
looking for
answer
it.
was to go to timing. He's like, well, if she's going to stick to me, she has to throw a knee at some point. Like, she has to try to score. And so I just wait for that and then off balance. So the answer to the hitch was balance.
Yeah.
in what he was doing.
He's also physically much larger and stronger than you. Like, if
Doesn't
he
matter.
ever wanted to stop what's happening, he could stop at any time.
Totally.
And that was really clear. And actually, that was a beautiful part about how he trained. Just like his student was so adept at riding the line of dominance, he too has this beautiful gentleness.
Yeah.
Can you feel that? It was like a gentleness, which is so crazy because a Muay Khao instructor, this gentle guiding of you. I likened it to a maze. Like, he would pose problems for you, but not so dominantly that you have no exit.
Yeah.
He would force you to find the counter,
To make
find the
decisions,
escape,
yeah.
make decisions. And he's actually a really beautiful teacher in this regard, because other teachers, they play the dominance game, they're former fighters, and they just lock you out.
They play the nope game.
They're like,
Not
nope,
that,
not
nope,
that, nope,
nope,
nope. And if you're a self-critical person, you could get deflated and lose curiosity.
Yeah.
And curiosity is a big part of learning.
Yeah. So instead of how do I get that to work, you're just like, oh, that doesn't work. Like,
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Not there. And then
Yeah.
you go to some other thing. Whereas the truth of the matter is, if you weren't going against somebody who was like mega experienced and had 35 pounds on you, there might be an escape there. And he was really good, I feel like, at posing difficult questions.
Yeah.
Right.
It's being able to, if you're like an academic or a poet or something, and you have someone who comes who is speaking a second language to you, you can converse in a real conversation rather than like, I'm going to talk slow and baby talk to you. Or talk way above you to show off that I have all of this vocabulary. It's totally like, and then you use a vocab word that's a little bit above theirs and see if they can pull it from the context.
You are the queen of analogies. That is exactly it. That is exactly it. And he was intrigued by your vocabulary level, so he was constantly adjusting himself. Like, oh, you know the counter to the counter. Let's go to the next counter to that.
Oh, you're good with Greek stems.
Go
in that direction.
Try Old English. Also, something that he didn't seem as taken by me, but I love this hand cup that he does, which is go you right in there, baby.
The reason you were so into it is because you weren't experiencing it, so you were like, oh my God, I see what he's doing. That's so amazing. And I'm like, what the fuck is happening? I can't control my arms.
But you weren't experiencing it while watching the video.
No.
But you still didn't seem into it. Like, I'm like captivated by this arm.
Yeah, so you
this
talk
hand
about
cup.
it because you're.
Well, I want to know
it.
why you're not into it. Boring.
It's not boring. It's just not something that. I don't know, like when I get excited about the light switch, you're not excited about the light switch in the background of a film. But to me, the amazing thing about the way he traps the hand is you kind of have this belief that you're like, that's okay for a minute.
That's what I love.
And then you're like, I can't actually pull my hand out. And then you realize where the vulnerabilities are with it at that level. And it's like, the level of panic is a slow burn.
What he does in the clinch, and please, if you're not a patron, go become a patron and watch this. You're gonna have to watch very closely because this is like magician sleight of hand stuff. This is not something that you'd be like, oh, how obvious. I
see what you did there.
The outside position in clinch is a very common and actually inferior position, and actually you can train too much of it and get yourself fucked in fights because as you loop your arm on the outside of a tie. This is very common because ties clinch for 30 minutes to an hour, and you get into these habits on clinch entry. Like, this is a really interesting part of clinch training is that you, because you train for so long, don't worry about the time, baby. Yeah.
Don't point it out.
I see you watching the clock. You're like Jane Fonda and Clute. We have, because you train for so long, there are some kind of, fights are very short, but you can develop some kind of marathon-y habits with your training partner that don't do well in a 2-minute round. And one of these is just getting into rote clinch entry positions. You and your partner just keep entering the same way. You take inside, I take outside. You take inside, I take outside. What happens is in a fight, you take outside, they get inside, and then they make the move and they get the point, and now it's over.
Yep.
And it's like, in training, you can take the outside position and you have all this time to work yourself inside. Like, everything unfolds over minutes and minutes and minutes, and it can produce, especially when you fight with referees who decide to break the clinch.